Hey everybody, I just dumped a bunch of broken up algae wafers into my native tank. That dark fish you see there is my warmouth, and I'm really surprised at the size of the pieces of the algae wafer that Mayan cichlid has been picking up. That mouth on that fish is getting pretty big too. The warmouth has a huge mouth, as you might expect with a name like warmouth. See, that's what I was kind of hoping we'd see on video. He just picked that chunk up that basically equates to half an algae wafer, and now it's going to swim around the tank with it all to itself. So it's definitely learned to take care of itself in the tank. We're not too worried anymore about it surviving. My concern at this point is how big is it going to get, how quickly is it going to get that big, and when is it going to start eating other fish out of my tank. So the real action will happen when the crayfish start coming out, seeing what's going on. There's my one that's got the half claw. Not really sure what happens when they slough. Presumably the half claw will be replaced by a full-size normal claw, but the missing claw I don't think is going to come out to be a brand new full-size claw. I think it'll come back as a smaller claw, and then over time it will eventually grow to be its full size. And speaking of full size, this one, you saw that half claw took off. That knows trouble when it sees it coming. This one usually lives down at the other end of the tank. I'm really surprised that it was over in that end of the cave. I was looking at this one that we're going to see off to the right here in a minute, and I thought that was the big one, except it clearly was not. But it's got all that beautiful blue coloring in the claws. The species of crayfish is called a virile crayfish, and they are actually invasive to Maryland. So technically these really shouldn't be in my native tank. See, that's where that big one normally lives. But all my life, this is the only kind of crayfish, to my knowledge, that I've ever seen in Maryland. I mean, I might have caught one or two here over the years. You know, I've caught a lot of crayfish over the years, so it's possible that I caught some that were a different species, but I've never once in my life looked at a crayfish and thought, that looks different, or that looks unusual. I wonder why I've never seen a crayfish like this before. So I don't suspect I've ever caught another crayfish in my entire life that was not one of these virile crayfish. So despite the fact that it's an invasive species, it's the only crayfish I've ever seen in the outdoors Maryland around here. I'm not saying it's the only one that is here, but it's the only one I've ever seen. So they've gone into my native tank, and they're absolutely fascinating creatures. They're one of my favorite animals. I really, really like them. They're just fun to watch. They're always doing something. They're always moving around and looking for stuff and moving things and digging. And I actually have these pieces of wood from time to time. I'll have to get in there and sort of reposition them, because the crayfish will actually move pieces of wood that large. Now, you got to take into account the added buoyancy of the water. So it's not like they're in there, lifting weights or anything. But that's still some pretty serious looking pieces of wood for a crayfish to shove around. And I've been down here before and seen movement out of the corner of my eye, and look over, and sure enough, it's a crayfish. It's up under here, it's got its back under there, and it's lifting up, and this whole structure is moving and shifting because a crayfish is in there. So it's pretty impossible to have a planted tank with crayfish. And if you do want to keep crayfish in your tank, if you look at this tank, you can see how many rocks and things I have in there. I placed them very, very carefully with the knowledge that crayfish were going to be going in this tank, and they're diggers and burrowers. And so if we were to drain this tank, all of those rocks would stand exactly where they are. If we were to vacuum out all that gravel, all of those rocks would stay exactly where they are. They're all very stable, and they're all sitting on egg crate plastic, so they're not even coming in contact with the glass. So if there is any shifting or movement and something falls or whatever, it's not actually going to impact the glass on the bottom of the tank. Crayfish are super easy to keep, But if you want to keep them in any kind of more elaborate tank rather than just some simple little, little 10-gallon or little 20-gallon tank with a few rocks and stuff, they're really, really easy to keep. But if you want to keep them in a tank that's larger like this, and you're going to have large, potentially dangerous rocks in it, or you want it to be a certain way, do a little bit of research. Really prepare for crayfish going into your tank, because they're really, really destructive little animals. They're little construction workers. They will get in the tank and rearrange it to their liking, and they will tear your plants up. They're voracious vegetarians. Most people, well, I won't say vegetarians, they are omnivores, but they prefer vegetable material in my experience. I always assumed they were pretty much meat eaters that would eat a little bit of vegetable if they got the chance, but it's quite the other way around. They actually prefer the vegetable material, and if they get a hold of any meaty stuff, they will go ahead and eat it. But they really prefer the vegetable stuff, and those big claws they have are not for catching and killing, although they can use them for that. They're used predominantly for sexual display and fighting. So there's some pretty big, impressive claws, and they can catch and kill fairly large animals, bigger fish than them, or, amphibians or whatever that are within their grasp. But that's not the primary purpose of those big claws. They really do spend most of their time eating vegetable material. So planted tanks are pretty much out of the question with these crayfish. And any kind of tank where you've got sort of an elaborate setup, or you don't want, gravel shifted around or rocks moved, then don't get a crayfish, because they will rearrange your tank for you unless you set it up to be crayfish proofed. Alright everybody, that looks like about all we're going to see action wise. Don't think there's going to be any real serious drama going on tonight, but we tried. So thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed. Don't forget, this is my native tank. Make sure you're subscribed, that way you won't miss any of these little random videos I do whenever I put them out. So thanks again for watching, hope you enjoyed. I'll see you real soon in the next one.